of Rights Act, attached as Exhibit 14206, which is on the back side of your agenda. This application is due tomorrow, and we are applying for $33,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act.
Could I have such a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Does this, have we looked at how much we've spent for the harassment, intimidation, and bullying that we've been overseeing for the last few years since it was mandated?
Yes, this is, there's certain items that you can apply for the reimbursement for, such as stipends, professional development, and materials. So this would be, I believe, I didn't fill out the application, Mrs. D'Angelo did, but I believe that most of this is stipends and materials.
For the last year or the last?
For the last year.
The last year only.
You still getting a lot of feedback. If you can't hear me in the back for some reason, we're just trying to adjust the volume so it sounds right all through the presentation. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. The next order of business is a presentation on, an updated presentation on our budget for school year 2014-15. Mr. Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Mishler. Again, I'm not going to use the mic tonight. I want to welcome everyone back here tonight. We have another outstanding turnout as we had last week. And certainly, I've been very impressed with this educational community that has really come together. And last week, I stood here and I asked you to please listen to our presentation and respectfully come up and give us your input, and you certainly did that. And I was extremely impressed with all of the input that we received that night, even from our eloquent students here, the members of the public who came up and were so passionate about the many wonderful programs that we have here in this district. And following that meeting, and certainly the board asked for your input, and I can't tell you of the hundreds of emails that we've been pouring through and reading and sharing, and certainly considering over the past week. We went to work immediately with our administrators, our principals, cabinet, our board, continuing our committee work, and considering all of the input that we received from the community, staff, and certainly tonight, after a week of doing that, we certainly tonight will propose again to the board where we feel we could deliver this program and preserve the quality that we all have come to know. So again tonight, our presentation will be the product of some very hard work by many people, and I include you in that work. I said we were going to be a team. We were a team. We worked all week long working with all of the input that has been provided to us. So we are up against the deadline of next week as far as putting a budget up. And tonight we asked for another meeting. We called you again and you came out. We appreciate that. I have one regret that we have a high school concert tonight where many people are at the high school, but when it comes time for these kinds of things, you cannot escape conflict. So tonight we are here to present an updated budget and to the board for their consideration, and certainly I think it reflects the incredible educational community that we have here. So without further ado, I'll ask Ms. Sugars to please present this budget.
Good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the presentations we've done already, where we have talked about sort of what the situation is and where we are. I heard some comments and saw some emails this week that seemed to indicate that as a district we have lost $4 million. We haven't lost $4 million. The challenge in this year's budget is the fact that we have both a funding challenge on the one side and an expense challenge. And the funding challenge is the fact that using our fund balances, which I had mentioned before, is sort of like our savings in a sense. We used $2.5 million of our fund balance in our budget last year in the 2013-14 budget. We currently have $406,000 that we must use in the budget for this year. So there's a significant decline in those funds that are available. And even if we increase our taxes by the full 2%, it's $1 million, just over $1 million. It doesn't make up for that lack of funding source with the fund balance. So even before we started our budgeting process, we knew that we had less funds and less revenues to work with. If we look on the expense side, we knew that we were going to have increases in expenses. At our current staffing levels, we were looking at $1.4 million increases in salaries and benefits of just over $900,000. Also, our other expenses, which is everything else, there's not salaries or benefits, were up as well. You know, our initial budget requests are always high, and we knew going into this process that they would need review, and we have done extensive review on them. But so we had sort of this double whammy, if you will, of less funding available before we even started the budgeting process, and increases in expenses that we had to deal with. So that kind of contributed to this $4 million problem or deficit that we have been talking about. So some of the funding assumptions we had reviewed last week and refined over some of our committee meetings that we had. The funding assumptions in the budget that we have been discussing has a 2% tax levy increase, which is the max tax levy increase that we can have. It also includes an activity participation fee, or a pay-to-play fee, if you will. Now, I think the last time I was here, these rates were a lot higher. We were talking about $300 at the high school and $200 at the middle school, and $40 to $80 at the UES. We have gotten some input that led us to believe that we should lower those numbers. So now we're looking at $25 to $50 at the UES for their co-curricular activities. $100 at WAMS for sports and theater, with $25 for clubs, and $225 for sports or theater at the high school, and $50 for clubs. It's an annual one-time fee per participant. So if you pay $225 and you play soccer, basketball, and lacrosse, you pay $225. You pay $225, you might only play one sport or might only be part of the theater. The family cap that's currently in our pay to participate policy is 3 times the highest fee, so that would be the max fee that any family would pay. And we would make exceptions for free and reduced lunch eligible students. We also talked about a parking fee, which is something new from the last time we were with you. $100 per student driver as an annual fee for parking. We will also maximize the use of our extraordinary aid and use as much fund balance as we feel that we can this year. Certainly not $2.5 million, but closer to around $800,000 in fund balance. And we also received 2 new categories of aid: park readiness aid and per pupil growth aid, which equates to about $75,000, and we would use those aids as well. So I just want to review one more time what banked cap is, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion about that. So banked cap is not a pot of money, but it is the ability for us to expand our taxing authority. So because in the past 3 years' budgets we have not gone to our full 2% tax increase, we have been able to bank that tax increase, and we can use it in certain circumstances in future budgets. We have to use it for a very specific need and amount. We can't just say, we need additional funds this year, we're going to use this. It has to be for something specific, and it can't be something that is deferred or incrementally completed over a longer period of time. We have to get county approval to do this, so should we decide to use this bank cap, we will have to submit our resolution and our specific needs and amount to the county and ask for their approval for it. It's a 3-year cycle, so the banked cap from the 2011-12 school year of $695,000 will be lost. If we don't use it in this budget, it goes away. And we have to go to 2% in order to use bank cap. We cannot go to less than 2% and try to use bank cap. We have to use all of our eligible statutory spending authority in this budget year before we can think about using any kind of bank cap. So some of the items that we, after, again, meeting with all of our board members and our administrators and discussing all of the feedback that we got from our last meeting, we have proposed in this budget that we would use $184,000 of the bank cap at the elementary schools, and that would restore kindergarten paras. All of them would be part-time. We did have a few, in this budget year, we have a few full-time paras, but we would have part-time kindergarten paras, and we would also restore the challenge program cut. So we're going from 2 to 1, we would maintain the 2 positions at the elementary school. At the UES, we would use $210,000 of bank cap, and we would restore the music position cut and restore the 2 world language cuts that were proposed. And at the WAM school, we would use $336,000 of banked cap, and we would restore the IT position, the science position, the 8/10 world language position, and we would also restore the language arts and math honors positions. That was 2 positions associated with that program. At the high school, we would use $248,000 worth of bank cap, and we would restore the guidance counselor position, the 2/10 world language that goes with the 8/10 at the middle school, and a half-time Spanish position. And we would also use restore 2 FTEs to alleviate some of the class size increase issues that we saw that may result from some of the cuts that we had put on the table. From an operational standpoint, there's a couple things that we felt we should use some of our bank cap. One is to restore professional development, as we are in our 3-year tech plan and implementing new technologies. We had cut some of our professional development money, and we feel that we want to restore those funds to make sure that we can provide all the professional development that's needed. School schedule development. One of the things that has been loud and clear to us as we've been going through this process is that we need to start thinking about changes for the future, and we need to be able to provide the same things but perhaps do it in a different way. So one of the items that we would look at would be to work with someone to take a look at our schedules, to take a look at our curriculums, and try to suggest changes, look at changes, whether we do more through technology or whatever that may be, but to take a look at our current schedules and our current formats and curriculums and suggest and help us make some changes there. And also, we had cut lease purchase funds. Now, our lease purchase funds, it's a 5-year purchase program. We purchase a lot of our technology. We also purchase textbooks. We purchase buses, things of that nature through our lease purchase funds. And we would restore some funds that we had cut that would allow us to purchase additional technology. So our total use of bank cap would be at $1.1 million, just over $1,168,603 of proposed uses of bank cap for this budget. So if we did in fact use that much bank cap, we would use all of the bank cap from the 2011-12 year, and we would use some of the bank cap from the 2012-13 year. So starting out with $2.5 million in bank cap, we would use just over $1.1 million, and it would leave us $1.3 million in bank cap that we could use in future years. So it would not be likely, will not be likely that we would generate any additional bank cap, certainly not in this budget year coming up. But we still need to make cuts because we still have some additional things that we need to do to close that gap. So we would be looking still, due to decline in enrollments, there would be a 2.7 FTE cut at the elementary level. At the UES, class size and enrollment decline, including a physical education position, we'd be looking at 2.25 FTEs at the UES. At WAMS, the Family Consumer Science program would be cut, and there would be one special education retirement that would not be replaced at the WAM school. And at the high school, we'd also be cutting the family consumer science program and would have some class size issues across all of the content areas at the high school. And those total cuts would equate to just over $1.2 million. From an operational standpoint, we would also make additional cuts. One of the cuts would be to outsource the nighttime custodial cleaning at the high school. We currently have outsourced custodial cleaning at the elementary schools, the UES, and just last year at the middle school. We have a piece of the high school outsourced now. We would look to outsource the rest of that nighttime custodial staff. We would also look at all of our other operational areas: transportation, maintenance, capital, insurance, classroom materials. We cut another $646,000 out of that area. That included looking at our tuition, our child study team, guidance, media center, all those kinds of support areas as well. We've also had gotten a lot of questions about administrative personnel, and we did cut at a position initially during our budget construction. So we haven't been talking about it as part of our budget cut process, because that was something that was cut going into the budget process. So there would be one administrative cut in the budget as well, and that came to $1.4 million in cuts. So we look at the tax impact of what this would equate to. Right now, for next year, the estimated ratables is $3 billion, just over $3 billion. Our average assessed home is pretty stable from year to year, so we're looking at $445,300 is the average assessed home. The total tax levy would go from $58,670,000 to $60,931,000, and the increase in the tax levy on the average assessed home would be approximately $141. There were some comments made the last time we were here about going back to levels at 2001, so we went back to take a look at that to see what it looked like then and what it looks like now. 2001, we had 270 teachers, 4 interpreters, 62 paraprofessionals, 31 grounds and buildings and grounds staff. We had 21 administrators, 30 secretaries, 22 non-affiliated. Non-affiliated is our tech staff, sort of our middle management staff, supervisor of transportation, buildings and grounds, things like that. Transportation staff, we had 41, for a total of 482 staff for 3627 in student enrollment for that year. Fast forward to 2013, we have 360 teachers, 3 interpreters, 100 paraprofessionals, 26 buildings and grounds staff, 20 administrators, 28 secretaries, 20 non-affiliated, 21 transportation, for a total of 579. And our enrollment is just over 300 students higher. So we'd have to make a lot of cuts to go back to 2001 levels in our teaching staff. Another question that has come up a lot is, okay, so we use bank cap this year, we solved the problem for this year, what happens in the future? This is, it's going to be a perpetual problem with a 2% cap in place and increases in expenses every year. What happens in the future? So we know that if we take a similar increase for 15-16 as we have in 2014-15, we would be looking at approximately, and again, these are just back of the envelope calculations, approximately a $3.2 million increase in expenses. Assuming that all of our funding projections are the same, let's say that we use the same amount of fund balance, we get the same amount of state aid, we have the same amount of tuition, all of those kinds of things, but we increase the taxes by 2%, we'll still need to find alternative revenue sources of approximately $2.1 million to accommodate that increase. So the message that we're getting loud and clear is that we need to start looking at different ways of providing what we provide in different ways that might not be as expensive, and to look at other revenue sources. What I did want to point out is that there's been a lot of talk about alternative revenue sources, corporate sponsorships, doing things to bring in revenue from other sources. And I would like to point out that we do bring in a certain amount of revenue each year. just from bringing other students into the district. We have approximately $400,000 in regular education tuition that comes in, and another $800,000 in special education tuition that comes in. We also have a pretty active rental of our facilities. If you come up here just about any night or on the weekends, particularly at the high school and the middle school, we probably make about $130,000 a year by renting out all of our facilities. Now, there's some costs associated with that, but we do bring in money doing that. We also provide business services for a neighboring school district, the Delanco School District. We provide business administrator services for them. We make about $40,000 a year by doing that as well. So we do have some other revenue sources that perhaps we need to think about and promote a little bit more. But you know, for long-term sustainability, we're going to have to look at doing things a different way.
So,
Not fast. It's flashing. So for purposes of this evening, I just want to reiterate the schedule with respect to our budget. As you know, because many of you were here, last week we took public comment about the budget. We have listened to what you said. We've received many thoughtful, fair, and passionate emails on either side of the equation, whether it's about particular programs or whether it's about tax increases. And we've asked the administration to balance all that and to also consider the fact that we had very small tax increases over the last 3 years for a reason. There's basically three simple scenarios that could have happened over those last 3 years. Number one, we could have budgeted the cap at 2% and continued to spend at a 0% tax increase, thereby accumulating the difference, what's now about $1 billion, and it was then too. And each year we could have done that, and we would be right back in the same place where the board would have to vote on a budget to appropriate fund balance surplus into this budget to make it balance. The second scenario is the really bad one, whereas we tax the cap at 2%, and we spend much more than what the actual budget increase was. So let's say, I think 1 year our tax increase was like 0.4%. So let's say we spent in that year 1.2%, and even though we had budgeted a lower level, we would have shrunk the amount of bank cap that we would have accumulated. And the third scenario, which is the one that we're in right now, is we left the money in the taxpayer's pocket. It has a string. The rules are very clear. They were from the start of the cap, that the board has the ability to access those funds at some time in the future under certain circumstances, which we have some of those circumstances in play here, with the understanding that it can't exceed, what we left in the pocket, essentially. And so that's what we have been discussing, charged the administration to look at, and that's their recommendation, that we use a portion of that. The next step in this process is next Tuesday night is our regular monthly board meeting. At that meeting, we will approve a preliminary budget. At that point, it's only going to the county. It's not the final budget. As all of you know, these budgets tend to change sometimes in some years more dramatically than others, but they always change between the preliminary and the final. The final budget vote is April 29th. We will we'll probably plan on some public presentation of where we are, because as every day goes along, we get a new set of facts. And we're talking about a small magnitude of change here, but just to be fair and totally transparent, we'll probably have another meeting. Well, we actually have a board meeting scheduled for April 18th. There may be another 8th. I would also caution that The board is now going to engage in a discussion about the issues you've heard tonight, ask questions, gather some more information, perhaps request more information in anticipation of having to make a vote on Tuesday. It's very important to realize that you can only vote if you show up. And I know that our board members that are here this evening, I believe are all committed to be there on next Tuesday. And I know that Mr. Pugh and Mrs. Zajac are both committed to be here next Tuesday. The same holds true for the vote on April 29th. You cannot vote by mail or email. You have to be here. So I'm hoping everyone is working hard to confirm that they will be available that evening and follow through with, I'm hoping, the same vote that we take on Tuesday. So at this point, I want to open the floor to the board members to ask questions of Mr. Rain and Ms. Sugars about what they've seen this evening.
I have two questions.
Why don't you move it in front of
All right, let's try this. How's that?
the better?
All right. So I have two questions. One has to do with the high school and the reductions of 5.5 FTEs in the class size. Have we calculated the end result of what the class sizes will be with these reductions and what classes are affected?
We have not calculated specifically where those cuts will be restored, or what the class size effect will have on it. We actually, we're just finalizing numbers and have just shared this with Mr. Seidel, so he hasn't had a chance to take a look at it yet. But by Tuesday, hopefully we can have an answer for you.
Okay. And the second question on you said there's $400,000 in tuition currently in the school district?
Yes.
Do we have a breakdown of what types of tuition students by any chance?
Predominantly, it is special education students that come from other districts. We do have a handful of parent-paid tuition students who come from other districts. Some of it is staff that brings their students here that pay tuition for that. And some of it is our extended day kindergarten program and our preschool program.
So just, some of that information would be useful for the committee that I'm chairing on revenue.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think we tend to forget about a lot of things that we do that are revenue related, and tend to think of revenue generation as more of giving as opposed to using the assets that we have to generate funds. I know we share employees with other school districts, et cetera, so we ought to just spend some time thinking and accumulating all the various things that we do so that we have a good picture going forward of what we've already accomplished, and then we can measure that against what we do accomplish. So, other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Mishler.
Yes.
So Lynn, if I won't do it again. So Lynn, if I go back to the numbers and add up the total use of bank cap at just about 1.168 million, the total cuts of 1.21 million, and then last but not least, the second set of cuts at 1.43 million, that gets me to right about 3.8. And if I add in the 2% tax increase, that actually gets us to about 4.9 million in total. So if we went to a zero budget this year, we'd have a $4.9 million deficit in our original projection. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, we did. We were able to do some things on the revenue side to alleviate some of those. We were able, like I said before, as I mentioned, the special ed and the regular ed tuition, we were able to increase those projections in the 14-15 budget versus what it was in the 13-14 budget.
Right.
We're also planning on budgeting some of our extraordinary aid, which we traditionally don't do. because we budget so much fund balance, we don't do both, but we're going to budget some of our extraordinary aid as well as one of our state revenues, and we have some additional state aid. So we were able to counterbalance some of the issues by increasing some of our revenues.
Okay, and so the 2% budgeting the cap is obviously a sacrifice that the taxpayers will make to make this work. The additional $1.168 million of bank cap, that's another sacrifice that the taxpayers will make, or investment, depending on your perspective, to make this work. We look at the cuts, the $1.2 million is loss of staff because, of course, we don't have an option to restructure our commitments. So our choice is either to keep or to cut. Our choice is to cut in this case because we have no other choice. And last but not least, we've got $1.4 million in additional operational efficiencies that the district was able to find from our original budget. So that's let's call that the operating sacrifice or the operating investment that this proposal makes. Now, if we look at these, if we look at the restoration of the programs that you suggested, and we start at the elementary school, when we put the $184,000 back into the 3 elementaries, what percentage of the original proposed cuts does that restore?
At the elementary level?
At the elementary level to start.
That is about half.
About half. And what are we still cutting at the elementary level?
Most of the cuts at the elementary level are specifically tied to enrollment. So we're looking at, I think it was 2.7 FTEs due to enrollment.
So that's an individual we don't need for, or a position we don't need for the next year because of lowered enrollment at the elementary school.
Yeah, some of it's regular ed, some of it is special ed, some of it is a specials reduction, but yes, it's due to enrollment at the elementary level.
Okay. And then if we go to the UES and we restored $210,000 of positions at the UES, what percentage of the original cuts is that?
That is, I guess, we're restoring about 210, and we are still going to cut about 165.
And is that 165 enrollment based, or is that actual programs that we're losing?
Some of it is enrollment based. We will see some higher class sizes at 6th grade, 5th grade.
5th grade?
Yes, but that is it's kind of an anomaly. It's moving through those grade levels. It's not a sustained issue.
It's a bit of a bubble?
Yes, a bubble. Yep.
It's that one class. All right, so for the elementary level and the UES, this budget would essentially restore the program to 2013 levels.
Except for enrollment.
Enrollment, right,
Yep.
which is, those are kids that are not there, so we don't need to pay for them.
Correct.
And positions that we don't need to staff for because the kids don't, there's not that population in that school. All right, and then we go to WAMS with the $336,000 of restored programs or non-cut programs, depending on your perspective. What percentage of the original cuts does that restore there?
That is, well, we're restoring 336, and we're still cutting just over 200,000, but the 2 cuts are both retirements that won't be replaced.
So the conclusion that I should reach from this presentation is K through 8, we're making no changes to the school? In terms of programs?
In terms of programs, correct. Other than the family consumer science.
I'm asking questions, so we're just trying to understand the context.
Other than the family consumer science program, the middle school.
So the FCS program is the only strand or curricular thread that's being eliminated through the 8th grade?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm sure there'll be some discussion about this, but I'm trying to understand it as well. Now, if we go to the high school, there's clearly cuts.
Yes.
And those cuts are primarily through, to put a fine point on it, making the delivery more efficient by putting more kids in the room. I know.
Well, it will result in increased class sizes.
Okay. Well, and efficiency cuts both ways, because there's efficiency from a fiscal perspective and there's efficiency from the keep the district in tax perspective. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that, Lee pointed that out as well. That's one of the sort of outstanding questions that we need to follow up on between now and next Tuesday is where are particular class sizes at the high school, where do we think they're moving as a result of this?
Okay.
And you can judge, once you have the answer, you can judge the result. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Lynn. Sorry about that. Lynn, I'm concerned about, or a question about class sizes at the UES. Are they changing?
The fifth grade will have larger class sizes. We actually did a waiver for them this year. They're fourth graders this year. We did a waiver for them this year. We'll do a waiver for them as well next year. They will go to 26, maybe 27 in a class. But the fourth grade is seeing a decline. Fourth grade is seeing a decline. So those class sizes will be under the 25.
So, sorry. Are you saying, is there a bubble moving through the UES where eventually the class sizes will go down, or is this something that will be sustained at 26, 27 child level?
It's a bubble that's moving through. They'll be, year after this, they'll be sixth graders. They'll be fifth graders going into 2014-15. Correct. So yeah, we'll have 2 years of it, but it is a bubble that's moving through the UES.
Right along is the issue that we have consistently had a class size waiver at some level for the last quite a few years. It's been one place or another.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another question for you, Lynn?
Go ahead.
On your forecast, basically what you're telling us is next year we start the budget process. You anticipate that we'll have a deficit of $3.2 million as the budget is currently constructed?
Yeah, as I said, that's some very quick back of the envelope calculations. If we project the increases we're seeing this year into the following budget year, we're looking at if we keep our staffing levels the same and anticipate the same investment in technology and all those things, we would be looking at approximately a $3.2 million increase in expenses.
Thank you.
And is that before the 2% thing? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, again, another $1 million, and then we've got $1.4 million of bank cap left.
Right.
I said that the $3 million is before you apply the 2% cap, which is equal to about $1 million, and we would have at that point approximately $1.4 million of bank cap left to use. And at that point, we will have used up all the bank cap that we have because
Correct.
we're now starting to budget at cap. So,
Yes.
Al, do you have
Could I-
any?
No, good.
Lynn, I have questions about the high school. So as far as what we're restoring, it's the guidance counselor situation. It's world language, alleviate the larger class sizes with the suggestion of the bank cap. And what we're cutting exactly at the high school would be what changes? Are we losing programs, and if so, which ones?
No, there wouldn't be, the only program that would be lost would be the Family Consumer Science program. The rest of the cuts would just be, would affect class size.
And the custodian person.
And the custodial person as well.
But the programming would be continuous except for family and consumer science.
Yes.
Yes, Cheryl.
So my question is just on the restoration of the 190,000 operational costs, the
Yes.
school schedule development. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Or?
Yeah, one of the things that we heard last week was about the need to look at our current schedules, look at our current curriculums, look at how we're delivering instruction, and to see if there are things that we could be doing differently. Is there some type of expert, or is there some type of guidance that we can get from someone that can help us take a look at those items to see if we could be making changes so that for future efficiencies and savings.
Okay, and I think that we had, I wasn't at the last meeting, but the one prior, there were some individuals in the room from the community who also sort of serve as educational assessment individuals. Would we potentially be able to tap into community resources and
Absolutely.
then that number would go down?
Potentially, depending upon what our needs are and what's available.
Do you have any other questions, Ken? I just have a question. Well, I'm just going to let Kathy finish if she was on a train. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to take it a minute, thank you.
Okay, Dave, question?
Just a couple of questions. I just want to get a feel for historically where we've been, just so we can understand this year on the historic. So if we go back 3 years ago to when we had a failed budget, and that was when we still had voters who voted on the budget each year, made the failed budget. Do you know approximately what our salary and benefit numbers were at that point in time?
That was the 2009, 2010 year.
I believe so.
That was previous to my time in the district, but I believe that our salary numbers were just over 40 million and our benefits were just under 10.
And take that forward to today. Where are we in the projected budget with our salary and benefit numbers?
We're just below 39 million in salaries and just over 10 million, or almost 11 million in benefits.
So the number between the two of them is approximately the same. The difference really is that the benefit number is going up.
Yes.
And that's just, and we have less staff members today than we did in 2009-10.
Yes.
And, I know that we have a committee, and hopefully we'll be able to get there with this over time. But, it's obvious that, our net number has been about the same. It's just that we have one number that continues to grow, one number that continues to shrink. We have a salary number that continues to shrink, a benefits number that continues to grow. But the overall education within the system, we're trying to maintain. We have all these people pushing us on revenue and everything else. We had a lot of people pushing us, rightly or wrongly, in trying to get benefits. And we all know that the governor helped us a couple of years ago with getting us, I'll call it a mandated concession for benefits. But I hope that there's a way that we can get there in the future. I know that we're working with the MEA now, talking to them about the future and ways that we could possibly make changes in these areas so that we can continue to provide the education we all believe is important across the board. And I hope, over time we're able to come up with some solution that fixes what is really becoming a long-term problem within the district, which is that, benefits are going up for everybody, and it's starting to impact in some ways how we're able to educate. And I hope that we're going to find other revenues to offset this over time as well. But I will say one other thing. The policy committee met in between these two meetings, and we reviewed our class size policy, and we're not making any recommendations to changes long-term to the class size policy. We don't think that that's wise. We obviously need to still continue done, in our opinion, the one-time waivers to the extent that we do this. We like the policy where it is right now. It's at 25, it's set for a reason. There's sound educational reason why we set it there, and the waiver process is probably a better way to go. That way we can continue these discussions going forward rather than move it up and then arbitrarily move it over and over again on a policy level. And my last question is on the high school. If I heard you correctly, Mr. Biggers, you had said that the high school cut number, or these numbers have just been brought back, and Mr. Seibel hasn't had a chance to look at these. Is that correct?
Yeah, they just, the final numbers were shared with them this afternoon because we were discussing them this evening, and he hasn't had a chance to digest and adjust yet.
Okay. So I'm kind of concerned that, obviously there's a lot of input from the administration within these schools as to how these numbers are playing out over time. And I am a little concerned that Mr. Seibel doesn't sound like was quite as involved with how these numbers were derived. I'm not sure if that's true or not, that's just how it sounded.
Just let me clarify in a second. The two positions that were restored, that's what Mr. Seibel and us, we're going to go back and look at. He's got a very good handle on what the class sizes are going to be in all of the areas. But the two that were restored, we're going to go back and see where those restorations will occur, in which areas. That's what Ms. Sugar is referring to. In other words, we were cutting positions, language arts, science, social studies, math. Correct. So if we are going to restore two of those positions, those recommendations will be made according to what class size is and how we're going to identify those two positions. Not clear?
No, it sounds like a dartboard.
I'm sorry?
It sounds like a dartboard to me. I'm not trying to be crass, but
Okay.
it sounds like a dartboard.
Well, if you look at the original cuts in the areas that we proposed at the high school included language arts, science, social studies, math, transition services. Under this proposal, we've got two positions to be determined for the restoration.
But curricularly, shouldn't we understand, I can say, I understand you're going to have this for us hopefully next week, but curricularly, just adding it back in, there needs to be a rationale as to why we're adding two positions back into any one of those areas, rather than just...
There will be rationale.
But the restoration now is just saying we're going to restore it, but I want to know the thought process and which ones we're restoring. I'm just lost in that transition.
Tell us the methodology that you used. Tell us how you prioritize the opportunities and what your recommendation is. That's simple. We've been looking at this for a long time now, and we've got class sizes, projections. We have class size projections for each of those areas, and at this point in time, we will go back and we will look at each of those areas with rationale behind which of the two positions we will recommend on Tuesday. Any other questions, Dave? No. I just want to go back to what you were asking about the benefits and salary levels, and I think the first year it was the total benefit package was $10 million, and then the next period you asked for it was 11.
Yeah, I have most of the numbers here. I mean,
It's like a 4-year spread or something like that. I just don't want to miss the point that the 10 went to 9.
Right.
I mean, the 10 went to something, and then it went down $1 billion last year, and now it's, I mean, the dramatic jump in the last year is not an anomaly, but it's something, to be reckoned with. It's been dramatic.
I mean, these are rough numbers, and I asked Lynn to put these together very quickly for me, so I know they're very rough, but just to kind of give you an idea, in 2009-10, our salaries were about just over $40 million.
Right.
Then they dropped down to $37 million in 10-11. Stayed at about 37 for 11-12, 38 for 12-13, 39, and then we're back down to 38, just under 39 this year. So the benefits really didn't start to ramp up in cost until 12-13 is when they started to really start to ramp in cost. Until then, they were pretty flat. If you go back to your clip, it jumped a lot, but you have about 9.7, 9.8, 9.9, and then it jumps up to 10.5, then it drops, and then it goes back up to just over 10.5. Last year, we got the drop out of it by the change, about $800,000 in savings. Now we're back up to where we would have probably been last year in benefits.
Okay.
I think it's important to say why we got that savings last year.
It was a change in the system.
It was a change in carriers.
Yeah.
We went from the state plan to Aetna Insurance. So,
Anyone else have any more questions? I have a series of questions I want to ask, but I want to make sure you all got them. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, Lynn. A lot of students expressed last week concern over the loss of potentially some extracurricular activities. Does the current budget maintain all of our offerings in the
Extracurricular and athletic cuts that we had originally proposed would be offset by the pay to participate program.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just had a quick question. Did you go back to Aetna? Have you had any discussions with them about negotiating down the increase that we're projecting?
I have had many conversations through our broker with them. I've spoken to our broker many times, come up with a couple of ideas, some things that I told them after I got through tonight I would come back and revisit and talk to them about. So we're constantly looking at that. We're constantly trying to evaluate that. Problem, as I had mentioned before, is that at this point they have a very short window of claims experience on which to base their pricing on.
Yeah, but we're still a great get for them. So.
We are, and we started out a very high usage rate, and it has dropped slightly. So we're trying to play that to our advantage.
Yay, okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple things that I wanted to mention before I open the floor to the public. I did come tonight wanting to talk about pay to participate. It's something that it's a program that I believe that we don't have much choice but to institute, but it's not one that I particularly care for. And at the prior recommendation level, I cared for it even less. I think I'm a little more in favor of the current structure, but I want to continue to talk about that and make sure I understand all the issues, and I haven't had the opportunity to see all of the particulars, such as what you have there. I want to make sure that we understand that if there is a parking fee at the high school, that we potentially drive students to park in our neighborhoods, and we have gone to great lengths to stop that in the past, and I wouldn't want to see it start again. It's not safe for them, it's not safe for the neighbors, so I'm not particularly in favor of that either. I do want to continue some conversation about our lease purchase and our technology budget. As some of you know, we've been talking about admin cuts, et cetera. We actually added someone partway through the year, Jeff's down at the end there, to be our director of technology, not only because of his expertise, but also because we have spent millions of dollars in this area. And I didn't believe at the time, nor do I believe now, that anyone other than Jeff is as qualified to help us with a plan of how to set up our system so it works when we need it to work, and help with professional development and a variety of other things. So I find that the lease purchase budget for technology, and also there's a significant number in there for a math pilot program. Now that's elementary?
Yes.
And it's pilot program because it's only going to be in one school, or we're not buying it, we're actually just testing it, or?
It's a pilot this year, and we would.
Oh, it's right now in place as a pilot.
That's the rollout price for the first year.
Well, in any case, there's a significant amount of money in this budget for lease purchase financing to acquire things like technology and that. And while I believe that we need to move in a particular direction, this is a very difficult budget. It's difficult to have gone through the process we've gone through to get to where we are. It's going to be difficult for some employees because they're not going to have positions next year. It's going to be difficult for taxpayers who've enjoyed a 0% or close to a tax increase for the last couple of years, and now they're not going to enjoy, a 3 point something, wherever it works out. So I think we need to just revisit that, perhaps talk about timing of how it gets instituted. Maybe it doesn't all get spent at once, so that if there's something that happens, that we don't expect, sometime mid-year, we wouldn't have committed those funds. We'd still have some surplus available to take care of an extraordinary issue. And then just a general comment about this budget tightens our opportunity to stay in balance. because there are quite a few things that we are budgeted, we used to budget at 50% of what we expect, like extraordinary aid's a good one. We don't know what our extraordinary aid's going to be this year. You don't find out till August. We just filled out the application the other day. So we used to get our extraordinary aid and then hope that that would become surplus that we could pass on to next year because we hadn't budgeted. Now we are actually budgeting. If that payment gets cut back, we will have lost, some of our flexibility.
Our wiggle room.
Right, and we use our flexibility all the time for any number of smaller things that make sense at a particular time. So it is a tighter budget. You can expect, you might expect, if you're a teacher, come to your administrator, or administrator come to us, or however it works, and say, gee, if I only had $20, I could really do this with you. This would be great. We always used to have that $20. I don't know that we're going to be able to do that quite the same, because this budget is that much tighter. Have we gotten any information on the possibility of an exception for the healthcare increase?
I've looked at that, and there could be a small exception for the healthcare. What we're speaking about is an ability to go above your 2% cap because of your increasing costs in healthcare. I need to know what the final number is before I can plug it in and find out exactly what that number would be. So hopefully after tonight we can do that and find out what it is. I believe it could be anywhere between $0 and maybe $150,000.
Okay.
If that were the case, I would recommend that we back off on the bank cap. I would take that 150 out of the bank cap and try to keep the tax levy at the same amount.
Let's find out what it is first. Let's see, any other board member have any questions about the proposed budget at this time?
Right. Are we emphasizing tonight, as I've heard in committee, that for any students that have difficulty in pay-to-play fees, that we will certainly look at that and make sure that they're held harmless, so that all students have the opportunities within our system?
Yes, we would use free and reduced lunch eligibility as a benchmark, as we do for many things. There's also sometimes, the family that is just having a difficult time, and we're usually getting into with that. So we would certainly take those into account.
Allow
as
for
well.
those exceptions.
Yes.
Yeah, we've also discussed that with the Education Foundation.
Right. But I want to make sure.
Yeah, no, that's
very important
absolutely.
that that's part of this understanding.
Sure, go ahead.
Lynn, in this budget, we've now brought in the concept of pay to participate. We talked about bank cap being added in. We've talked about tax levy being increased. We've talked about all these things. Is there any reason why we don't drive ourselves to a number for revenue generation on top of that and just put it in here? I mean, a budget is in some ways founded in reality, in other ways founded in aspiration of where you want to go and how you're going to be there. And sometimes to drive yourself to get there, you've got to put a number into your budget, reasonable, obtainable, but to get yourself going so that you don't end up short. Because if you don't put yourself with some goal, some reason to get there, some reason to put it into our budget for next year, even if it's a small number this year, why are we not thinking that way? Why are we not saying, let's put a $50,000 plug number in there and say, we're going to commit ourselves to raising this year $50,000 in these other revenue sources?
Well, I think we already did put some of the
Where?
the revenue in that we're getting with shared services with
But we already
Delanco
have
and
those.
with.
But those are the ones we already have. The public's been asking us to think differently. Can you get closer to that thing? Think differently about bringing in more monies from other sources. I think if we owe it to the public, if we are going to commit ourselves to going down this road of alternative revenue generation, and whether it be through, sale of a sign or an advertisement, whatever it is, commit ourselves to putting some number in. Let's not be gun shy because we had a footfall several years ago on putting this into place, that we don't want to say we can do it next year. It just drives us to make us do it.
I hear what you're saying. My hesitancy in that would be that we're already, as Don kind of alluded to, budgeting some things that we don't typically budget. We're budgeting fund balance above that $406,000 level. We're talking about extraordinary aid. My concern would be one more thing, that if it doesn't pan out the way we wanted it to, that we would have additional concerns and shortfalls in revenue, which affects our fund balance even more for the following year. Worst case scenario, if we did, have a windfall year in revenue generation and we made extra money, we could always let that lapse into fund balance and use it in the following year. But given that we're doing some things that are new to us this year, I would be hesitant to throw that on top of the pile as well. I know that there's lots of meetings and people are talking about things and perhaps for the 15-16 budget, that could be a strategy that we could use. I would be hesitant to recommend that for 14-15.
Now you've had it 10,000, 15,000. I'm not talking about putting $150,000 in this number and being unrealistic. I'm asking the question.
So Dave,
What does it balance out? Yeah. What do you balance that out with?
so just to answer Dave's question, we've had one meeting and several side meetings with the Revenue Generation Committee so far. I can assure you that the target is going to be much higher than you're thinking. In terms of putting it into a budget, I think it is difficult. Putting in a number in the $50,000 range, I don't think it's going to be problematic. I don't see an issue with that. Obviously, the objective is going to be to drive a much higher number. And it's also to build revenue streams that are repeatable so that we can build them in bigger numbers into future budgets. So that's the objective. To be perfectly honest with you, on a small number in the budget for next year, I don't foresee any issue doing something like that. I'd be really disappointed if we can get something that trivial, and obviously we shoot for a lot more. While I have the microphone, Don had asked a question about technology. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the investment is this year.
Lee, can you move it closer to you?
I will try.
Thank you.
Too close.
I know. I did want to spend a couple of minutes on the technology investment this year, just to let people understand really where it originated, what it's intended to support, and what the big chunky pieces are that we're lined up to spend on this year. First of all, about 12 months ago or so, the directive was to create a 3-year plan that was linked directly to curriculum and involved, obviously, administration. Ms. Butler and Ms. Rowe did most of the heavy lifting on putting together this 3-year plan. And they also held, at the same time, meetings with staff, MEA members, to make sure that what we were doing in terms of future investment was in line with what the technology investment would be. And those of you who have been at board meetings in the past, you'll know a year ago, the big push, or the emphasis was, has to be connected to curriculum, has to have some sort of benefit associated with it. So we have a couple of things in play. First of all, there's park readiness that we have to be prepared for. And there's certain system requirements and purchases we have to make in order to be compliant and for our children to be prepared to take the portions of those tests in online or on a computer-based environment. We also made an investment last year on the curriculum side in a Journeys program. It's a broad-based curriculum focused on reading, and a portion of that is actually linked into the use of smart boards, particularly in K through 5 is where we're focusing. In addition, there's math curriculum that's under consideration for next year and is in the current budget that will also leverage smart boards in the K through 5 environments. There's also the question that's been around for a long time about consistency of delivery and our ability to make sure that every grade, every class is getting a consistent experience so that you don't see huge differentials in what the course of learning needs to be. This will help that. It also gives us what I'll call latency in our ability to deliver education to our children now and in the future, and as we face other challenges down the line in terms of how we do what we do at potentially a lower resource level, we have to be prepared for being able to give access to content that's being delivered in the classroom on a 24/7 basis. And so this lays the foundation for that. It also gives us the ability to display in the classroom on a consistent basis these materials and this content, and to give each teacher the tools that they need in order to prepare materials that they have confidence can be delivered in the classroom setting, will display, will play, and obviously gives them that opportunity that we don't think it is today. In terms of the big parts of the investment, there are 3. that constitute about 75% of it. One is a replacement of most of the computers in labs and classrooms throughout the district. We're in a 5 to 7 year age of that particular group of equipment, and those of you who are technology buffs know that's pretty long in the tooth. So we have a big replacement cycle across the district. We also have the laptop initiative that links into all the things that I just described in the K through 5 environment. And then we have the smart boards that are also linked into those particular grade levels. So those are the big parts of the investment. It is an investment of an additional $100,000 that wasn't in the original budget versus what's in this budget. And the other thing I'd like everybody to keep in mind is that these investments will touch not one, not two, but every student and practically every teacher in the district. So that's the nature of the investment. That's why we're doing it. And it is linked into a plan that is being driven by curriculum.
So, did that generate another question? So to summarize, the plan from the administration is a budget that maintains a significant portion of our existing program, contains some investment in the future, and uses some of our resources that in the form of bank cap that we have saved for this purpose, but we would rather not be using it and not cutting programs at the same time. We'd rather have it, but we're going to lose some of that, which is going to lose some of our flexibility in the future. So I am going to open the microphone to public comment. Before I do, if any of the students in the room would like to speak, I'd like to let the students go first. And one final, I did say earlier on that I thought I don't know if there was 100 emails or not, I tried to respond something to all of them. Sometimes I answered questions, sometimes I simply said thank you and we're working hard on it, because I knew we were working hard on it. And as I said, they were very thoughtful and very fair and very passionate on any number of subjects. There was one set of emails that concerned me, and that was a petition that I was told, I didn't look at the petition, it was a petition concerning the outsourcing of paraprofessionals. We have not had a discussion for the last year and a half about outsourcing paraprofessionals. I've had 2 or 3 meetings directly with the SPEAK people because many of the full-time paraprofessionals are associated with IEPs and other special education programs. They were concerned about it. I've assured them that it's not on our agenda. I cannot say anything that will bind a future board, but it's not on this board's agenda for now or in this budget. So I want to make that absolutely clear. So students, if you would like to speak, it's okay, you don't have to. I heard some of you were very eloquent the last time, so.
I will be attending Columbia University to study mechanical engineering and applied physics. In the fall of 2010, I entered the high school shy, alone, and afraid. I had no idea what was in store for me over the next 4 years of my life. Although I had a few close friends, I struggled with anxiety and thus time management. I had trouble balancing my social and academic lives. Now, I'm a confident senior with a bright future ahead of me. Through my participation in Moorestown's debate and robotics programs, and with the help of teachers like Mr. Sinatra, Mr. Mooney, Mr. Wright, and Mr. Bross, I've overcome many personal obstacles. I get to attend my dream college and pursue the interests I discovered here at Moorestown High School. Freshman year, I decided to go on a model Congress trip. I had absolutely no experience in public speaking nor a working knowledge of our nation's government. The The trip challenged me and forced me to go outside of my comfort zone. Since then, I've participated in 5 more conferences and won 6 awards, most recently a gavel in one of Harvard Model Congress's special programs. I never would have discovered my passion for politics and debate without the Model Congress program at the high school. Also, I participate in policy debate, and this year I helped lead the team to our 2nd consecutive junior varsity championship. My personal successes in this program could never have occurred without the guidance and support of Miss Young, Mr. Wright, and especially Mr. Mooney. Their involvement in Moorestown's debate program has been instrumental in my development into a mindful, intelligent student and human being. Without their help, I probably wouldn't have the courage to speak at this meeting tonight. In addition to forensics, I also participate in Moorestown's first robotics team. Although this program has only existed for 1 year, it is hands down the most important program I participate in. Junior year in Mr. Wright's freshman honors robotics class, I discovered my passion for engineering and problem solving. This year, I was able to use this knowledge of mechanical and electrical engineering while building our nearly 100-pound robot who's named Pretzel. This team has given me real hands-on experience in engineering that will definitely be useful for me when I'm at Columbia. Our advisors, Mr. Wright and Mr. Bross, are the core of our team. There is no one at Moorestown High School as dedicated or passionate about robotics as they are. Our team did wonderfully at our first competition and in all likelihood will be advancing to the regional competition at Lehigh University. Without the dedication, experience, and time commitment of Mr. Wright and Mr. Bross, this never would have been possible. Finally, I'd like to say a few words about one of my favorite, most beloved teachers at the high school, Mr. Sinatra. I've had Mr. Sinatra for both honors pre-calculus and AP Calculus BC. Although he has only taught at Moorestown for a year and a half, he is one of the best math teachers I've ever had as a student. He makes a very complicated topic quite easy to understand, and without Mr. Sinatra, I would absolutely not be prepared to enter a rigorous calculus-based engineering program in the fall. I encourage you to consider the importance of teachers like Mr. Sinatra, teachers that fully engage their students when making decisions about next year's budget. Please take advantage of resources like bank CAFT and increased tax revenues to continue Moorestown's tradition of academic excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. So many of your emails start out with, we know that we have a very thankless job. That's thank you to me. Just like graduation and handing out diplomas. Thanks for coming. Any other students? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Beth Aberrant. I'm a junior at Moorestown High School. I am currently the president of the cooking club at Moorestown High School. And I would really urge the board to consider a proposal to eliminate the Family and Consumer Science program. This program gives the students a reason to, important life skills to the students. They need these skills to learn how to cook. One of them is learning how to raise a child. You can't learn that anywhere else besides your mom. I feel like it's pretty important. I'd also like to thank the board for their time and effort addressing this budget situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Just lean it towards you a little bit. I think I'll be fine. Oh, there you go.
Hi, I'm Stephen Plannon. I'm a 5th grader at the UES. I take orchestra, band, French, and Spanish, and enjoy these classes very much. And so many of my peers enjoy these classes too. We hope that you could vote to create. We wish that you could keep these programs running for next year and years to come. We created a petition that I would like to submit.
Any other students? Okay, oh, yes, ma'am. Are you all part of the same group or are you separate?
We're both members of Madrigals, which is the a cappella group at the Moorestown High School, and we're also members of the concert choir. And we just both wanted to say a couple words about our amazing teacher, Mrs. Markowski. I met her in my freshman year, and she's literally made the biggest impact on my life, not only as a singer and a performer, but just as a person. Words cannot describe what an amazing teacher she is.
I would have to say, like, if anybody could embody Moorestown High School music program, nobody could do it better than Mrs. Markowski. She's the perfect person to teach it. She knows so much about music, and she's taught us so much. She's so dedicated to this job, and she really cares about each and every one of us, which is really special in a teacher.
So we just wanted to ask you to keep that in mind when making your decisions about that, because it's those teachers that are really important.
We understand. Thank you very much. Non-students, if you would give us your name and address. Yes, ma'am? Come to the microphone, please. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were with them or if you'd like to speak, please come. You came all this way. Yeah.
I take a lot of issue. First of all, my name is Sophia Gamber. I'm a senior at the high school. Hi, everybody. Thank you. That's lovely. I take a lot of issue with what's going into the budget this year. I think most people here, as evidenced by the numbers here, take a lot of issue with what's going into the budget this year. I think it'd be impossible for me to tell you all of the important and amazing programs that have benefited me in so many ways over my 13 years in this district. I have begun here as a 5-year-old, and I've left here as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old student, and I feel so confident in the life that I am going to have thanks to this district. But the thing that really bothers me the most about this proposed budget is the proposed pay to participate. Thank you. Yes, horrible. I think of all the options we have, it is in some ways the lesser of two evils, but it is definitely an evil. I think it upholds a long-held standard that education is only for the wealthy. I think it upholds a standard that we cannot hold ourselves to. And I think for me, as someone who has benefited immensely from the extracurricular activities that I have led, that I have been a part of, that I have founded, I know that my life would not be as full without them. I know that my chances at paying for my college education would not be as likely or as easy without the scholarship funds that I've received for my participation within these activities, for the collegiate level leadership conferences that I've been invited to for these extracurricular activities. I know it's proposed that we will be able to help students who can't pay for these programs, but we don't recognize that there is a middle ground. There are people who struggle to pay for their expenses who aren't necessarily, in the reduced lunch program. My family struggles to stay in this district every year. We try because this is the place to get a world-renowned education. This is where we go so that we can have the best life possible. And it wouldn't be possible for me if I had had to pay for my club participation. I wouldn't have been able to afford it, but I wouldn't have qualified for assistance. And that is an issue that I ask the board to consider immensely closely, in addition to all of the other things that must be, of course, immensely closely considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, let me just mention, you know, one of the things that I had on my list that I still want to talk about is that particular issue. We may come to a conclusion up to at the preliminary budget that's one way. It may change again. It's something we're going to continue to talk about, and we really appreciate your feedback. So, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from other members of the community about the same issue, whether they were able to afford it or not. It's not something that I think is particularly palatable. And I agree with that extracurricular activities are sometimes the heart of your education. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Amy Delgado, 6 Walnut Court. I have a student in 4th grade currently at the UES, so she's in that bubble grade that she's in an inclusion classroom with 26 kids this year. So I just wanted to know if I could get a little clarification as they go. Obviously, they have the biggest class. What do you, because you said maybe 26, 27. She's already at 26. So where would that number be for them?
So, yeah.
We currently have 12 sections in 4th grade, and we will have 12 sections again next year in 5th grade. We don't anticipate that enrollment will change too much. We will have students who move out over the summer. We will have students who move in. We are currently at 303 students in 4th grade. We anticipate that to stay about the same number for 5th grade. So the classes will be at 25, with a couple of those who may move up to 26. And that's where we'll be for 5th grade next year.
So even with the cut, it will, because we're at 26 now.
Not
so
every class is at
no.
26.
Okay.
3 of the 12 sections currently are at 26.
Okay. So it would be about the same. And I also just want to say, piggybacking on what you said, I agree with you about the pay to play. I know it's a huge revenue booster. It probably makes sense financially, but I do feel like the middle ground of Moorestown does tend to get lost quite often. We have very, very wealthy people, and then there's people that are just regular people. People that don't get raises every year, people that pay more and more and more for everything. And sometimes, I mean, we have a family of 4, so I'm speaking from somebody that will be paying a lot for a lot of years. So.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, hello. My name is Laura O'Hear, and I live at 318 West 3rd Street. And I have 3 comments. The first being that, Mr. Mishler, I know that you said you didn't have a choice but to institute the pay per play for the clubs. And I can tell you that you do have a choice, because it is technically a rounding number. A rounding error is bigger than the amount that you'll receive from these students that are paying to play. $25 for a fee for clubs and $225 for athletics. It is chump change compared to the cost of operation in the total budget. So I ask you to please, because it's going to touch people personally, and please consider just wiping the whole thing out. I don't know if all of you know, but there have been numerous cases, lawsuits across the country, many sponsored by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. They say that free in a constitution is free. When you say you have a totally free education, that means you don't have to come out of pocket for any of the things that a school offers a child. And I will tell you that paying for parking in a lot that's already paid for as part of your capital budget is not free. That is a fee. That is a user fee, and that means it's not free education. A lot of those kids that drive to school also drive to jobs afterwards, or they take their younger brothers and sisters to appointments while their parents work. And so I suggest to you guys that that also is something you should reconsider. And thirdly, you talked about getting rid of the home ec or whatever. I can't remember the name of the class, but it's basically the cooking class. And I will tell you that most of us are like, you know, we suffered through cooking in high school. But none of you know, because I don't have clients in Moorestown, but I own a public affairs company. I used to be a lobbyist. Most of my clients are in other states. But I work very closely with food banks in 4 different states and hundreds of charities that I do public affairs for and public relations. And the silent majority of the people that go to those food banks are not on assisted programs. They don't qualify for those free lunches, but they're the ones that are at Moorestown Hardware now being carpenters because they're underemployed and they haven't gotten a job in 2 years and their house is flipped and it's worth less than they paid for it. They are not going to come to you and embarrass their kids and ask for money so their kids can go to these programs. They'll just drop out. And that's what happens nationwide. So I suggest to you, you probably all are employed, and to you, $100, $500, $1,000 is nothing. It's the principle. If kids get free education, they get it whether it's in morning, noon, or night. Whether it's the weekend, it's free. So I suggest to you think twice about that. And then the last thing is about the food. Excuse me. I work very closely with a lot of grocery chains, and there's a thing called food deserts, where kids across the country are not able to get to grocery stores. ShopRite is one of my clients. Kids are not learning how to cook vegetables anymore, and the reality is that kids are undernourished and malnourished. They get plenty of food. They may be overweight and they're malnourished. And there are programs that are going to teach kids how to cook so they know what a squash is and how to cook it. If you get rid of this little program, it may not seem like much to you, but the reality is those kids are learning how to sew and take care of themselves, and budget and cook. And so it is a trend to bring those into the schools, not to take them away. Thank you.
The gentleman in the hat wanted, I said he could come up next. Yes, sir? Okay, I didn't know that was long.
Hi, I'm Rick Rohrbach, 317 Westover. I have two questions and a comment. The first question has to do with the high school. It sounds like we were going to have 5.5 FTEs cut, and 2 of those positions are going to be replaced. I guess I'm curious, why don't we just dip more into the bank cap and replace all of them? Because the other positions that were cut had to do with enrollment reductions. So what's the rationale to cut any positions in high school?
The original cuts were proposed in the areas that we talked about earlier. I think we would take the first 2 priority areas where the class sizes would be the most challenging, and at this point, that's what our proposal is. Your question is use bank cap to cover all of the areas. That's something the board would have to discuss.
K-8, all the reductions related to a reduction in enrollment. In high school, any of the reductions are going to result in an increased class size. And I'm wondering how we came up with 5.5 to begin with, and why we're resolving back to 3, or 3.5.
I wasn't here, but I know that in the past, the elementary schools had some pretty significant cuts in previous years. We are now at class size of 25 in the early grades, and in prioritizing the class sizes at high school going to 27, as opposed to 4th grade going to 27, I think the priority is to keep the elementary school as low as possible.
But that assumes that you have to do one or the other. I guess I'm just saying there's more money in the bank cap. Why not use it so we don't have to deal with that? Because we're talking about revenue generation down the road, and we're talking about looking at other cost reductions. And Mr. Weinstein, you talked about healthcare benefits. So, why don't we do that? I don't understand why we wouldn't dip into it.
I understand your statement, and the board will take it under consideration.
So that's the first question. Second question, it was alluded to, but I haven't heard a number. How much money is expected to be raised for the paper fund?
Right now, it's about $200,000 between the pay-to-play and the parking fee.
In the parking. What's that? I'm sorry, I asked how much the pay-to-play was going to raise. The answer was $200,000. And I just want to piggyback. I agree that we should do this for all the reasons that were said. I also want to point out that the clubs and the athletic and the sports teams already defray a significant portion of the cost of those programs through their own fundraising efforts, and because the parents are already writing checks for some of that program. So they are already paying more than their fair share of the cost. So I think to ask for more is unreasonable. Thank you.
Hello. Jim Johnston, 34 Castleton. I've heard a lot of numbers and looked at a lot of numbers over the past few weeks, and I heard a new one tonight. There was a back-of-the-envelope estimate for next year's budget that if we raise taxes the allowable 2%, we will still have a $3 million shortfall. So call it a $2 million shortfall, okay? So on a $60 million budget, we raise taxes another $1.2 million, so call that $1 million. We're still $2 million short. That means expenses are going up $3 million, correct? On a $60 million budget. So that's about 5%, correct? So expenses are going up 5% a year. The governor has said we're only allowed to raise revenue 2% per year. So we're going to get this crowd together every year, right? And look at cutting services 3% a year. Every year, for as long as expenses keep going up, 5% a year. My question is, if cost of living is going up about 1.5% a year, why are our expenses going up 3 times that? I don't think there's an answer here tonight, but I think that's really all the parking fees, pay to play, those are pennies compared to what we're talking about. We can't cut services 3% a year every year. These people, a lot of people moved here or stayed here specifically for the schools. That's why a lot of people are here. I think we have to look at how expenses are outpacing cost of living by such a great extent over the next few years. Thank you.
How are you? Can you hear me? Sorry. Mark Sullivan, 100 Erickson Ave. One of the questions I had, I know earlier, I believe it's Ms. Sugars, my vision's not that good, had mentioned that the school district's bringing in roughly $400,000, I believe she said, through busing in special needs people from other townships and stuff like that. First question I had is, how much are we putting out as far as busing kids in who aren't special needs? Just bringing kids back in from other towns who may have lived here for a month, 6 months, 7 months like that, moved out of town, and now we're spending money to bring them back to town and keeping them coming to schools. The reason I'm asking that is because we're talking about passing a hat around basically to the seniors, 200 seniors to collect a couple $1,000s in parking, whereas we're putting $20,000, $30,000 out to bring a kid 10 miles from another town to this school who I don't understand why they can't just go to school in that town.
The only situation where we would bring a child in from another district that we would be responsible for the transportation would be in a homeless situation.
That's not true. I know 6 children in my daughter's grade alone who are being brought in from other towns. Okay? We're sending buses out to pick these children up. They are not special needs children. They're being brought in at our expense. I don't know what it costs to run a bus for an individual child. I'm assuming $20,000 to $30,000 a year, though, between paying the driver, fuel, and stuff like that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, again, we're talking about passing around hats here to collect money from students to play for sports, to charge them for parking. It's a little ridiculous. I've been in this town my entire life. My family's been in this town for 200 years. For those of us that have been born, raised here, it means something to be in this town. It's an embarrassment to have to start telling people, oh, well, can you pull your wallet out to play baseball this year, or can you pull your wallet out to park here? It's ridiculous for this township. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir, if I just, I would ask you to call my office in the morning, make an appointment so we can determine who these students are, who you're talking about with.
That would be perfect, because I'm personally upset because I've heard their parents openly laugh about how they have kids that are going to be coming here for the next few years,
I'm
free of charge, on our dime.
I'm asking you to please
Okay.
come to my office, and I would like to know that information. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My name is Joachim Mahner from 4 South Colonial Ridge. I have 2 kids here in the district, one in UAS and one on the way, 3.5 years old. 2 set of questions. One is on the pay to play. I must say I'm not in favor of that. I see, just like the other speakers here, a lot of potential side effects of that. Couple of questions, I know you're going to take it offline, but first is, have we started the scenarios with lawsuits? How much will they cost? Would that potentially offset the revenue if there's 1 or 2 lawsuits against it? Secondly, how exactly it's going to be for these parents that don't qualify for the lunch program? How much administrative hoops would they have to go through? Would they have to document tax revenue for the last 5 years? Have meetings? How much administrative hoops would they have to go through to get a waiver and not have to pay?
Hold on.
He has to put the mic on.
Oh, mic on.
He,
Hello? Okay,
Yes.
yes. So how many administrative hoops would parents have to go through if they don't qualify for the lunch program? Have to show tax revenue, meet several times, fill out forms. I mean, how embarrassing, and how much would they have to do that? And thirdly, if we really have to go that route, what about just making it voluntary? So nobody has to pay, but we encourage people to pay. That way, we get rid of some of the embarrassment, some of the administration, and the lawsuit. I'm sure that there are people here that can afford it and would write the check and support it. And finally, if we really want to embarrass people, to get kids to drop out and not do the extracurricular activities, because in high school it was several $100s, and we heard these are money that not everybody can afford. If we really want to go that route, why not wait to a year where we don't have bank cap? Why not consider this our safety wall? So use bank cap this year, use bank cap next year. The third year, where we really have no other option, then go to this pay to play. Why extort? Why use up this option now when we have alternatives? It's $200,000. We can take it from the bank cap. So that was one set of questions. The other is to the increased class sizes in the high school. I'm sure you're all aware of the rating that most of high school have gotten and the increase in high school rating. I'm sure you're aware that in addition to test scores and other things, one of the factors that our rating increased, I believe, from like 40 up to, I don't remember the numbers, but quite dramatic over the last few years. You know, you saw the cover article. One of the factors is class size. If we're going to increase our class size, have you studied the impact that we can expect on the rating of the high school? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not on mute. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Marcy Healy, and I just have 3 questions. Obviously, pay-to-play is a very small chunk of our budget, and we have other issues that we have to address in order to really address the budget. But in terms of pay-to-play, for the $225, let's say, for the high school, what is that going to cover? Like, what's the breakdown for that?
That would cover, the fees would be associated with any position that had a stipend associated with it. So, you know, if it was a sports or a theater program or some of the clubs, it would be $225 as an annual fee for the student, and it would just be used to offset the overall cost of the program.
Just the overall cost? Because my son does theater and magicals, and we just did the ad book, we just finished, and let me tell you, the programs here are amazing. I did email the board members a letter about the certain programs and the pay to play, but I guess my concern is we already, I paid a $100 ad, I'm donating food, and I'm doing all these other things, and I'm happy to do that. It's not that I'm not happy to do that. But what you're saying is that my taxes are going to increase 220. People here probably have some child involved in some kind of club or some kind of sports or some kind of after-school program. That's an extra $225 I'm going to be paying in my taxes. And, you know, it's a stipend, but we already pay for things like bags, you know, sports equipment. I have three other boys that already went through this program, and I didn't have to pay to play for them. So to pay to play at this point, when we have the kind of assets that we can put into our taxes that'll go across the town for $200,000 just really doesn't make any sense to me. I guess my next question would be, in terms of the school schedule development part where you were saying that money was put back into that piece, how much was that?
It's approximately $50,000.
Okay, for $50,000, for the amount of supervisors, and I'm an educator, for the amount of supervisors that we have in our district, I would highly suggest taking one of our supervisors and doing that school schedule development program. We do not have to outsource something like that. That's why we have supervisors. I work in Moorestown, our supervisors do all of those things. Make somebody an expert, and I'm sure that it's a schedule. So scheduling development should come from our supervisors or administrators. It should not be $50,000 that's outsourced. Now you're down to $150,000 for pay to play. That's very simple problem that can be solved. And the second thing I wanted to know is, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have all-day kindergarten here at all. But not extended day. I mean, extended day is in, like at Baker, where they have, what's extended? Okay, so we do have, how many classrooms is that?
This current year, right now, we're almost at 3 classes at Baker, 2 classes at South Valley, and 1 class.
Okay, so we already did that, because that's one of the revenue makers that we use in our district, and I was wondering if that was something that we were going to look into. Okay, great. I was just trying to figure out if there are any other revenue assets. And I highly suggest to the board that you look at other districts that are making revenue outside, because there's a lot of districts that are ahead of us right now. So that would be one of the things that I'd highly suggest looking into. I know our district is going into like a daycare type of situation for our employees to make money. So, you know, that's another way that I think we should be forward thinking right now, and I'm not really sure if we're doing that. So thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Andrew Roberts. I live at 121 Oakmont Drive. Spoke last week, it seems, and just want to, I think, remark on some of the comments that were made tonight. My first question, I think it's already been asked before, but I'd really like to see a presentation on what it takes to get a decent audio system in here. Because I have to admit, I've been in this room for 3 meetings and a play, and every time we've had AV issues, and to have that issue in a district like this is just an embarrassment. I feel for the kids who have to deal with it on a day-in, day-out basis. So, my first point. My second point is to Mr. Ream. I'd like to continue my thought of history that I brought up last time. I'd like to introduce you, no relative of mine, but this is Mary Roberts. And I'd just like to talk about how far we've come in the last 100 years. And in doing the research to, I guess, question the board, I spent some time on the district website and looked at some of the presentations that the schools had done. And I don't know if you had a chance to do that, but about 100 years ago, 1920, Mary Roberts was chosen by George Baker, another one of our schools, to become the high school principal. Miss Roberts received an additional raise of $1,000. She took that sum and split it among 10 teachers she felt needed it more than her, while she continued her teaching responsibilities. 100 years ago, we had principals that gave back to the community and also taught classes. And I'm not sure, no offense, I'm not sure that we have the same level of commitment these days. And I'm not sure how up to date all the staffing is, but I spent about 2 hours going through the various organizations and the staff that are listed there. In my line of business, when we look at staff cuts, I work for Bank of America, so we're very familiar with how to do more with less. We've been paying a lot of fines. We're all doing 2 or 3 jobs that we had colleagues doing before. So whenever we look at this stuff, the first thing we do is we look at an org chart. And unfortunately, I don't see an org chart. So I had to place one together, and I spent about 2 hours doing it. And for my count, and maybe I'm off by a couple of numbers, we have at least 119 full-time staff in district that don't teach classes. Now, that includes nurses and custodians.
Nurses teach in the elementary level.
I'm sorry?
Nurses teach in the elementary level.
Sorry. But about 120. And I'd like to see some comparisons. The point I'm trying to make. I'm a vice president, Bank of America. My boss is a director. His boss is a senior director. None of us have secretaries. When I look at the staffing in the school district, I see so many secretaries, and I have to wonder, in this day and age, with voicemails and emails and automation of the way we do attendance, have we looked at, do we need this secretary for this vice principal versus cutting a teacher that interacts with my children day in and day out? I'd like to see some justification from that. You mentioned that there'll be 1 FTE in administration as part of the reductions. I'd like to question, I know we're paying for a superintendent who is not here tonight. Is that the FTE elimination that you're talking about?
No.
No. So it's 2 FTEs because we are paying for Brian Betts this year? Is that included in the budget?
He steps into that place, essentially.
Okay. So we're paying 2 this year. We're only paying 1 next year. Is that correct?
We will be paying for 2 for some part of this year. Mr. Reed started in the beginning of February.
Okay. So there's a reduction there. Is that the FTE reduction that you're talking about?
No.
No. So there's additional cost savings there. Is that reflected in the budget? Yeah. It is. Okay. The outsourcing to Blanco, I think you used the number of $40,000. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It is. Have they reduced their business administration staff entirely?
They do not have a business administrator.
So I believe their budget is about $10 million, if my memory serves me correctly. Ours is about 50, right?
Altogether, ours is closer to 70, and I don't believe theirs is quite 10.
So have we done analysis of the ratio of our business administration office versus theirs? Is it in line?
Well, they have some clerical and secretarial staff, and they have a part-time business administrator. But in terms of looking at, I wouldn't compare us to Delanco. I might compare us to other districts that are like size.
And it's, when I challenged you last week to come up with creative solutions, it's these types of creative, not adding 1 teacher here or there. It's looking at the entire picture. And unfortunately, I couldn't print it out because the org chart was so big with all of the administration staff. It's these types of questions that I'm expecting the board to ask. And I'm not an insider. I don't know how these discussions are. I don't know if it's essentially the Board of Ed just looking at the superintendent and the business administrator making these recommendations. But it's these types of hard questions that I'd expect to be asked when we're faced with a budget crisis like this. And I'm not sure that they have, because what I saw, an adjustment last week versus this week, is just focusing on our teachers. I have not heard details on the support staff that could potentially be reduced to save the teachers that interact with our kids day in and day out. Another question I have is, I understand about 2 or 3 years ago, staff has been asked to contribute, has been mandated by law, to contribute to the cost of their benefits. We keep talking about the increased cost of benefits. Can you help me understand how the increased cost of benefits were offset by the staff contributions to those expenses?
The Chapter 78 is the name of the law that you're speaking of, and it's phased in over 4 years. So 2014-15 will actually be in the 4th year. So in the first year, staff paid 25% of what their contribution would be. Last year, they paid 50% of what their contribution would be. This year, they're paying 75%, and next year, they'll pay 100% of what their required contribution will be.
Right. So did we not get some relief from the increased cost benefits from those contributions?
The contributions are not, unfortunately, the cost of the premiums are rising higher than the cost of the contributions. Right. And, it's not enough of it certainly helps, but it's not enough of an offset.
Lynn, can you define contribution?
Yeah, the contribution, it's hard to categorize it because it literally is a separate calculation for every employee in the district. Right. It's a sliding scale. It's based on your level of income and your level of coverage. Right. And so employees that make less pay less of a percentage, whereas employees that are higher on the salary scale pay more of a percentage towards the cost of their benefits.
Is that broken out in your budget, on the line item that we can analyze?
It is not broken out in the budget because it would be too cumbersome to do all those, but we do have a separate spreadsheet.
And those contributions are put directly into our school budget? They don't go into an overall fund or anything like that?
They don't. What we do is we offset the health benefits expenses by them.
Okay. The last question I have is I understand when we did lose Brian Betts that you stepped in as acting superintendent. I assume that your assistant business administrator stepped up to your role and performed your duties?
She did not.
So you were performing both duties?
Yes.
Okay. It seems that in my business, where we have surplus capacity like that, where we have the ability to have people, that is the first place that we look for reductions. My question directly to you is are there going to be reductions in your staff? Because it sounds like you had excess capacity to be assistant, acting superintendent, and business administrator.
Well, I'm not sure why you just said that. What if she, Mrs. Sugars, simply started working twice as hard?
Then I'd expect her to continue doing that, because we're all working twice as hard these days.
So you're not even considering that she might have been working at 110% of her capacity to begin with?
Then we are all working at extra capacity.
I agree, so am I. But that doesn't mean that you can automatically assume that because she was able to do both, that there's just excess capacity.
I'm sorry, what was the term that was used? We were increasing class efficiencies? Is that the word that was used? So I think there's potential efficiencies that could be done there in light of the excess capacity that we potentially have. One last quote I'd like to read, and this is from you, Mr. Mishler, from a July 19th, 2011 press release, where you justified not increasing taxes. To quote Don Mishler, board president noted that the additional state funding provided the board with an unprecedented opportunity to provide relief to taxpayers while maintaining financial stability. To me, the last 3 years has not felt like financial stability. It felt like financial crisis, and we continue to experience financial crisis. I've charted out, and I think you tried to address what I'm about to say earlier in your comments tonight. but I had charted out if we'd gone to cap each of the last 3 years, that we would have a surplus of $5 million today. Now, maybe we didn't have to go to full cap the last 3 years. Maybe we wouldn't have eroded the surplus that we've had over the last 3 years, but it's this, I want to use the word erosion again. It's this constant erosion. 3 years ago, we took a couple teachers away and a couple critical, what I would say critical programs away. We're doing it again this year. We're talking about doing it again next year. I've been paying taxes for 20 years. I've been paying taxes while your children had the benefit of all these programs, while your children did not have to pay to play. This is the first year my daughter is playing school sports. After 20 years of paying taxes so that society could enjoy these things, now they're being taken away from my children, and that's why I'm fighting tonight. I'm fighting for my children for the combined 25 years that they're going to spend in this district. I don't intend to leave. I want to maintain the level that we have come to expect. I want to draw a line in the sand saying that we have to do something to maintain, not erode the quality of Moorestown education. And if that involves, as I'm suggesting, maybe taking away some administration so we can keep staff that provide these services, I would suggest it may be time to start looking at that. Because from what I saw in your presentation tonight, we're not doing that. And I believe that's a mistake. So I would implore the Board of Ed, just take a look, Mr. Tate, just take a look at all of the overhead and see where we can make reductions that don't directly impact the education of our children. Thank you.
Stacy Balderson, Bartram Road. I'd add a couple comments to add on to the pay-to-play. I think the comment on the tax base was that with the 2% cap, we go up about $141 per household. I don't understand why you don't take that $200,000 and put it into the tax base. You could ask the county for an increase above the 2% tax cap if you had to, or take it out of the surplus. But I think it's ridiculous to spread that $200,000 over the students. You can go over your cap if you need to. All you have to do is ask the county, and you're well aware of that. Second thing, on the 5.5 FTEs at the high school, I'm appalled that you're thinking about cutting language arts, science, social studies, and math. The core curriculum, that's where you're going to cut your FTEs. That's where you're going to cut your FTEs, is that correct?
We're not cutting those programs.
You're cutting FTEs from those programs.
We're raising class sizes.
You're raising class sizes so that it's more difficult for students to get the one-on-one basis they need. You're already at 25 at the high school.
And we're at 25 in the elementary.
And let me remind you, there were a number of students that stood up here to talk about Mr. Sinatra. He's a 1.5 year teacher. I'm certain he would be on the chopping block for one of those things. If you ran the school district as you ran a business, and you did things on experience and not on experience, you did on performance, you wouldn't have these kinds of issues. Just a sidebar. The other thing is, you know, if you look at your website, you say we have an 11.5 to 1 ratio. I am assuming when you say 11.5 to 1, when you're talking about class sizes of 25 to 1, you're obviously adding in your administration to that, which is a bit deceiving in terms of your touch points with the students. The other piece is when we're thinking about cutting teachers, while our math programs are very good, I would challenge you to look at our language arts programs. If you've looked at the test scores lately, you see those language arts test scores are not going up. They're either stable or going down, and I really would challenge you to look at your language arts program. I think it falls short of what other districts are doing, and I can personally speak by looking at my own children's language arts test scores that they are nowhere near the math programs in the Moorestown School District.
Thank you.
Hi, I I just want to say thank you for your service. I'm sorry? Dina Selbach, 145 Holmes Terrace. I want to start by thanking you for your service. I think it's a thankless job. I know it. Creating a budget in this climate is not easy. And I, like Dave and Mark, who spoke earlier, and other faces in the room, grew up in this town. My education was here, K to 12. I'm here because of these schools. Trust me, it was a fight to move here with my husband. He was like, it's ridiculous to spend that money. And I said, there is no price we can put on our schools and our son's education. And that's why we're here. And I know that I speak for many when I say that. And I have to say, my son is now in 4th grade at the UES, and we could not be more pleased with his education thus far. He was at Baker. He succeeded very well with many diverse teachers, many of whom I wouldn't have chosen for him, but served him well. And I recently, the past few months, have spoken with a friend who's a fellow educator, actually an administrator in another district in our state. She and her husband just put their dream home that they built 8 years ago on the market because they weren't happy with their school district. So she's been talking with me about Moorestown and our schools, and I bragged and bragged, and she's decided to move here. Their house is already, they've had an offer, it's been on the market for a week. And I sat here tonight and I was appalled that so many important programs were on the chopping block. And I was embarrassed that I bragged. I'm glad to see that you've found the money to restore them, or I know you didn't find it, but you've shifted it. Our music and our world language are very important. I know there are a lot of many other issues have been spoken tonight. I applaud our teachers and our administrators and you. I guess you're administrators too. But I applaud you and your efforts, and I just ask that you really consider our class size. I think to call it efficient is an oxymoron. It's not efficient. And any educator and really any person who's gone to school has to know that. And I also ask in these times when state testing is what counts, apparently. I don't agree with that, but let's face it, that's what we value. That's what the world values right now, or our country values. And we're gonna put that on the line, like class size, that's gonna be the greatest impact on our kids and our tests. And to say that our curriculum is driving this, our curriculum is driven by testing. It's a fact, it's a sad fact, but it is what it is. And I think we have to put the money where it is gonna best serve our kids, and that's in the teachers and the staff and the administrators. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Must have scared everybody away. Thank you for hearing me tonight. My name is Elizabeth Hughes. I live at 311 Pleasant Valley Avenue. I came originally tonight to address you about the paraprofessionals situation, which, despite, Mr. Mishler, your assurances that it's not been discussed, up until now, your stance on outsourcing paraprofessionals has been pretty vague. And the slide presentation that you put forth, Ms. Sugars, in February, really didn't specify exactly what restructuring our paraprofessionals really meant. And for those of us who have children in the elementary schools, for special needs parents, we know that the people involved in our programs, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, people in SPEAC, they've been talking about the possibility that you would outsource these paraprofessionals for quite some time. So basically, I apologize for the abruptness of it, but I felt the need to call you out. So I created the petition on change.org so that you could see exactly what the community thinks about this. I have to agree with the gentleman who spoke before me. I'm not going to say it with so many facts or anything, but it seems to me like you guys year after year are cutting the lean rather than the fat. You have administrators, directors who have had 80% of their staff outsourced, and yet they continue to make insane salaries and bonuses every year. If we added up just the administrative director's salaries, it would be pretty embarrassing to say that you need to lay off 5 people last year. It was clearly not an essential decision. We don't trust you anymore. We don't trust the decisions that you're making because you're saying that things are essential cuts, and then you're blowing money just months later. Blowing money. I've never heard of anybody who resigned who was paid to not work. 5 men lost their jobs, $125,000 savings. And then you turned around and spent twice that for somebody not to work. We don't trust you. We don't believe that you're telling us this is exactly what we have to do because this is the only money we have available. Well, we don't really believe that you're looking in the places that you should be looking. You need to start at the top and start cutting the fat. Because the people who are at the bottom do the most amount of work for the least amount of money and have the most impact on our kids. I'm going to continue. I actually tonight printed out around 6:30 in the evening the 460 plus signatures that the petition has had. I also have 12 pages of comments from parents, from people who are employed in other districts where they have outsourced paraprofessionals and are suffering horrendously because of it. I really believe that you guys can do your job. I think that we are a community. Believe me, I went through the parent directory name by name and emailed everybody. And in those names, I see some of the most successful and gifted and innovative people. Our parents, look around. Like, we're talking about success stories here. Clearly, there are people in the community who can aid you and assist you in trying to make this budget work without sacrificing the people who are in our kids' faces for 6 hours a day. Paraprofessionals, and I felt bad because I didn't explain paraprofessionals to everybody. There are some people who think that paraprofessionals are just with the special needs kids or they act as the crossing guard. No, the paraprofessionals are in the classrooms with our children. The teacher stands at the front of the classroom and teaches. The paraprofessionals are the ones who are sitting right next to our kids like this, helping them to write, to draw, to color, to do the things that they need to do. That is not something that we need to outsource. I think that we can all agree outsourcing, it saves you money. Yes, that's it. There is no other. You can cut programs in music, you can cut programs in art, you can cut math and science, and there are things in the community, there are ways for us to make up for those losses in small ways. But when you're talking about the direct relationship between a child and a caregiver, in that child's formative years, there is nothing can make up for a mediocre experience with a caregiver. Nothing. There's no community program. There are no donations from a corporate center. Nothing can make up for that. And I'm sorry I wasted your time since it's not on the table for this budget, but clearly it's going to be a consideration in the future, and it's not one that we're willing to sacrifice. So.
Excuse me, at this time I'd like to put something in perspective here that's been addressed a few times. As a new superintendent here, I would like to, there was a comment made last week about the staffing, that we would revert back to the staffing of 2001. And I want to applaud this board because back in 2001, we had 481 staff members in the district. Today we have 579. And because of the needs of our children in this district, in that time, we hired 90 teachers, 38 paraprofessionals to deliver instruction to the children in this district. Also during that time, I have to put this out there, we had 20 administrators in 2001. We have 20 today. We also, the board over those years have now 3 less secretaries, 1 less non-affiliated staff, 5 less building and grounds, and I know that's offset by some outsourcing. But I applaud this board for over the 13 years since 2001, when we've increased enrollment by 400 students, for responding and adding 90 teachers and 38 paraprofessionals to this staff. Now, because of those numbers, obviously in tougher times, those are the positions that sometimes have to be looked at, unfortunately. So this is something that they've responded to over the last 13 years. And now when we're faced with caps and these challenges, unfortunately, those 128 people who we hired directly in the classroom, unfortunately, that's where we have to face. But I do want to, I also wanted to make a point that the administrative staff is the same as it was in 2001. Different people, maybe different job responsibilities. But the focus here has been the classroom, the focus has been the children, and the focus has been hiring teachers and paraprofessionals in this district. Thank you.
Yes, hello, I'm Natalie Fleming, and I live at 24 Castleton Lane. And I guess my first point is just a question. Are you firing a guidance counselor at the high school? Terminating and ending one? I saw that there was up on the chart that there was some sort of a restaffing or restructuring of the guidance at the high school that was still on the table, and I just wondered what that restructuring entailed.
The reinstatement of the guidance position is one of the banked cap recommendations.
So there will be no cuts at all?
If the board accepts those recommendations, yes.
Okay. And I guess the other question is, have you already sent out layoff notices to teachers for the coming year based on your prior cuts that you thought you were going to make?
We have not given we've had informal conversations. We've not given any formal notifications at this point.
Okay. And I guess my comment would be I have 3 children, 2 boys who are freshmen at high school and a 6th grade girl, and it's just very surprising to me that you would make cuts in the high school teaching staff. As a number of people have said, the other cuts seem to be based on decreasing enrollment, and I appreciate that, but I haven't really heard any justification for why it's okay to make cuts at the high school that are not based on declining enrollments. And I guess, every stage of a child's development is critical, certainly, but high school certainly is a critical stage, and it's critical not just developmentally, but it's also critical for their success in later life and their success in getting into college and so forth. And smaller class sizes seem to be very helpful in success for the students, not just in terms of the actual classroom time, but as you know, there's a 12th period that occurs after school at the high school, and it's already can be kind of busy during 12th period with a lot of students wanting help and so forth. And I just can't imagine if those class sizes were even higher, that program or that time wouldn't be even, the efficiency and effectiveness wouldn't be further diminished. So I would ask that, again, I guess, you sort of dig deep and think hard about whether there's any other place that cuts can be made besides getting rid of teachers, because as many people have commented, they're what we think of when we think of school. We think of the teachers because they have our kids all day. And so I guess, and as someone's mentioned, it does affect the rating of the school, et cetera. And those are kind of the, the practical considerations and the rational considerations. But I do want to comment on one other thing, which is, there's a human element too. And I know that you have to crunch numbers, but my view of these teachers in this district is that many of them, I think, could have been doctors, they could have been lawyers, they could have made some significant money. And they chose teaching, and I think it's an avocation for them and not just a vocation. And they're with my children all day, and my children come home and they tell me great stories about what the teachers told them. And I've met and I've become friendly with many of their teachers. And I am so impressed and so proud to have my children spend time with them. And it just seems to me that the teachers should be the very, very last place that we look to make any cuts in this district. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandy Brooks. I live at 11 Valley View Terrace. I have 4 daughters. My oldest graduated from Moorestown High School. I have a junior at the high school, an 8th grader at WAMS, and a 4th grader at the UES. We've been here 14, 15 years. All my girls went to Roberts, all had Mrs. Williams, all graduated, and couldn't be happier with Moorestown. So every topic, every topic that's been discussed, whether it be cutting teachers at the high school, which is a concern, or the pay to play, or the paraprofessionals, or one-on-one, all of it has got my head reeling, and I don't even know where to begin. But I have a 4th grader who's a special needs, who has an IEP, and she went to Roberts preschool development program, and she's doing great at the UES. And it scares me that she might not have a one-on-one, or it might be outsourced to somebody, because she just needs to, she has Mrs. Calhoun right now, and before that she had Mrs. Resnick, and they're her world. So she's probably going to have an IEP all through high school, and I don't want it to be a stranger with her. So that's the first thing. That got me really emotional. But the other thing is the pay to play. I have 2 daughters that play sports. My junior's on the varsity soccer and lacrosse team. My 8th grader's going down the same road. And I'm a middle-class mom. I'll figure out a way to do the pay to play. I'll steal from Paul to pay Peter. I'll do it. Because I'm not going to cut my daughter to be a varsity player, or my 8th grader. That's all they care about is, MG Lax and MG girls soccer. I mean, it's all I hear about all the time. So just try to figure out a way. I mean, it's a pride thing. Like, my girls wear their Moorestown sweatshirts, and they are like the proudest girls. And I have a part-time job in the mall at night, and I see people that come in, kids that don't have a direction. I can see them. I know who they look like, and whether it's theater or sports or singing or music, these are important to our kids, and they keep them on the right track along with our teachers. So I know you have a hard job, and I'm sorry, I'm so emotional, I gotta go. Anyway, thank you.
My name is Joanne Broder Summerson, and my address is 245 North Riding Drive. I'm going to try to keep this as short, sweet, to the point as possible. One, I think moving forward, and I can't speak for the rest of the community, but I hope that we become more solution-oriented, and I hope we don't make this an us versus them situation. We're here to work together, and as it's mentioned, we do have a talented room of parents who can help with these issues. I think there needs to be more collaboration, and I think one simple solution for the here and now to start is maybe setting up something simple like a social media page, like just so that parents can discuss these issues, and we don't have to wait to come to these meetings that, I just got here. I had another obligation. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to be here that can't. So just to keep everybody involved and to collaborate and to work with you, not against you. That's it.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Roberts at 121 Oakmont Drive. A quick question that I have is when you put the revised budget for this year, you put down about the study of a school schedule development of $50,000. My question to you would be, why have something that you're going to pay $50,000 if you already have a director of curriculum that has 8 staff members? Isn't that their purpose? Is that not? That would be a question.
Yeah, I think, just turn the mic on. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, the board and the district made a commitment to do some strategic planning, which many districts do.
Can you elaborate what that means?
Well, you're taking a look at your entire program. You're bringing in people from the outside, basically experts, to look at your program and to work with you, to possibly make suggestions and changes. So I think that commitment was started, and we heard from loud and clear that it didn't continue. So we're looking to continue that now as another area that we can look at our entire program and perhaps bring in experts, obviously, who do this for a living, and many districts do bring in for strategic planning, and that's a wish of the board that we go in that direction.
At a hefty cost of $50,000, where you supposedly have hired the best of the best for having 9 people, I mean, a director, and then 8 other people working for this person?
Correct.
But they're not the best of the best, so you need somebody on the outside? Aren't they supposed to be?
We're all the best of the best here.
Okay.
Our teachers, administrators,
I
our
agree with the
kids,
teachers. I commend the teachers immensely. But my question that I'm having is, if we're looking at cutting programs for everyone with pay to play and so forth, $50,000 to me sounds like a waste if we already have people in the district right now, and I'm assuming that's their job, correct? With the 8 other people working for this director with curriculum. So I'm assuming that you have content supervisors, is that?
Those supervisors would be an integral part of the whole process of strategic planning.
So then my suggestion would be to look at this $50,000 as maybe something not to do right now, since we don't have that type of money on the table, if we already have things in place. Thank you.
Good evening, Matt Vitovich, 26 Spruce Court. My wife and I moved here a little over 10 years ago from a brand new home that we were very happy with, specifically to bring our children that were young at the time into what we considered to be one of the better school districts in the state. We made that decision knowing that there was going to be a price to pay in increased taxes, and we felt that that was definitely worth the investment. I maybe didn't know I was going to be spending so much time fixing up a older home that I had to sacrifice by giving up the brand new home, but I still consider it worth it. So as a taxpayer, whereas say when I drive to the Rite Aid, I kind of wince when I go by the new municipal building and think about what that's doing to my taxes. I'm perfectly willing to pay whatever it takes to send my children to a good school. In terms of some of what's being considered to be cut, my oldest daughter, who is now a senior and getting ready to graduate and has just recently been accepted to Stockton State, especially in high school years, she's developed a lot of problems in terms of attention and antisocial issues that if it wasn't for the child studies team as part of that, we would never have been able to get her through high school. And I consider that to be a very important, maybe not for every student, but I think for those students like my daughter, I think it's very crucial that that not be cut. And as part of her problems, one of the things that helped her, because she's not athletic, her extracurricular activity was the theater and the choir. Those things that also seem to be the first to get looked at for being cut. Aside from otherwise maybe just having spent all her time at home and in her room, she was able to get herself out of the house and come here and participate in stage crew or participate in plays and participate in the choir, and you could see almost a change in her attitude and the way she presented herself, her excitement over something like that. One of the few things that seems to get her excited. So I would ask that you use the knife very sparingly if you're going to look at those type of areas if you do have to cut things. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Elena Trinchieri. I live in 579 Sentinel Road. First of all, I wanted to give you kudos for bringing back the language in the UES. Having grown up in 2 countries, I started learning English in kindergarten, as you can see. The fact that kids start learning another language in 4th grade to me was appalling at first, but the fact that you wanted to cut it shocked me, so I'm glad you're returning that. But my question is this, are you still cutting the music program for the 4th graders, or are they going to start orchestra in 4th grade now? Because that's what you said at the last meeting.
That is also one of the proposed reinstatements with the bank cap would be the music position as well.
Okay, so because I have a 2nd grader, 7th grader, and a 9th grader, and going to my 9th grader, I'm concerned with the paper play. I just wanted to say that with 3 kids and having them involved in many clubs and activities, and it adds up. And just take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Oh, I hate to say to go and cut teachers. I want the board to consider not to cut the teachers. That's one. If you are planning to move forward with that, what is the criteria you're going to use to pick the teacher? Is it going to be tenure or it's going to be meritocracy?
By contract.
Can you elaborate on that? What does contract mean?
It's both contractual and law, is how you go about.
Contractual and?
It's tenure, based on tenure and seniority.
So even if a teacher who is good has only 1 year of experience, they get eliminated first?
Unfortunately, that's the case sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
It also depends on your certification.
Correct. Depends on the area that we're cutting.
So is that because of the law, or that's how it is?
Law and contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Atul Wadhwa at 705 Bentley Court. I have 2 boys who are in this district. This is my first meeting I've come to, so I'm first time actually speaking in this. I find, we also moved in this district about 10 years ago. And our goal was, we looked at all different school systems around here. We came from Cherry Hill and we moved here. And the purpose was, the school system is really good. And over the period of time, what we are seeing, there are a lot of programs that we think are very important for the kids. High school from K through 12 is the most important year for kids. This is when we build their pillars. This is when we launch them to the future. And for us to think of cutting the programs, such as language arts, special extra activities, guidance counselor in high school, that's very important. And we were thinking about cutting. I know we're restoring it back. Just to have it on that is appalling that we thought of those things to cut. My kids depend on those things. We don't go and look at these different sports, but for them to go and ask questions to guidance counselors, to learn about things, what should they be doing for next, college period. I think those extra surroundings are very important. And for us to increase the size of the, high school student classes, this is when we need to be shrinking it, not increasing it. This is very important for high school kids, and we heard it over and over. Ranking of the school matters. You're looking at how kids apply to college matters. This is when they take all the tests to get into colleges matters. and then we are making it more difficult by increasing the sizes, which makes it harder for them to learn. I don't think we should be looking at teachers because they are the most important people in our school district and for our kids. Cutting 5 full-time teachers is just, I find it very hard to accept. I really feel that you all need to take a look at it, where next the budget should be coming from.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Holly Hellman. I live at 19 East Maple Avenue. And actually, I have a question for Mr. Powell. You were talking about a lot of things and so on. Can you go back to repeat some of the things that you had mentioned on that list?
Sure, hopefully I'll hit the ones you're looking for. I talked about 3 buckets of costs that are the majority of this year's ask. There are replacements for PCs throughout the district in labs and in classrooms. There's an aging group there of 5 to 7 years, so they need to be replaced and recycled out. There's a set of smart boards throughout the K through 5 areas in the school district. Those are directly correlated to 2 particular programs, of course, of study that we've already adopted, one for reading the journeys, the second is the math that will be instituted next year. And the third are for that same K through 5, enabling each of the classrooms with a computer laptop for use by the teacher in conjunction, obviously, with those programs and others. Those are the 3 biggest areas.
So my question to you is, in terms of the smart board, what's going to happen in terms of helping the teachers learn how to use those? Because it's not as easy as just 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely. So in the budget as well, what was Reading stated was an additional set of dollars for professional development to make sure that they're utilized. If you go back actually 2 years, there was an ask for a number of smart boards, and we didn't go through at that time because we did not have a plan in place. We now have a plan in place. Next year will be the 2nd year of that plan. It also did not create a linkage between what we were trying to achieve from a curricular standpoint with how that translated into technology.
Okay. The reason that I'm asking all of these things is because I think about just my own family and my personal life, and I think about if you need extra things like those very larger, more costly, effective things, you wait to get them until their time when you can afford to get those things. So right now, looking at the budget and looking at the district and things, I mean, we spend a lot of money to buy a new reading series for our school last year. We're spending a lot of money right now teaching the teachers that Orton Gillingham program, and then spending a lot of money to pay for subs to come into the rooms to watch the children while the teachers are being in service on these extra things. And I'm just wondering why that is something right now when we don't have the money to spend, and we're cutting teachers and taking back from the things that they need right now. Why are we adding those extra things? Are they really necessary? Because I think about, like I said, my own family, and if we had extra things to buy, we don't buy them until we have extra money to have for those. And I'm not really sure, you know, I work in a district, I'm a teacher, and we have a lot of smart boards, and it took me a very long time to learn how to use it. It didn't happen quickly, and I'm pretty technologically savvy and so forth. And I'm wondering why that's something that we need to do right now.
So I'll answer that with a little bit of some redundancy, but hopefully embellish it a little bit. When the plan was put together, we actually had, as I said a moment ago, requests for smart boards throughout the district for various needs. And to your point, because there wasn't a specific need for it, we didn't buy it. Basically, we said until there is a cohesive plan in place that lays out what we need and when we need it, then that's what we're going to put in place, and then we're going to follow that plan. To essentially pull that out now would, number one, set back, obviously, the vision that we put forward and the connection to curriculum, and it would create a devaluation of the math and the reading programs that are, one's already in place, one's imminently going to be in place. So I think you sort of shortchange yourself if you were to pull that out of the budget right now. Some of the other spend, in particular, as I said, is for aging equipment that we really don't have much of a choice. We need to do it. We've also upgraded the ability of our network to handle a certain amount of bandwidth, and then obviously the equipment that's going to be in the classroom for us to take advantage of that, we wouldn't gain that benefit as well. I could go on with some other things, but suffice it to say that this has been a very deliberate, planned process, linked to curriculum, and connected to a teachers committee who also meets on technology matters in conjunction with the committee that's working between the board and administration. So if we hadn't done those things, I think that I would probably say there's things we should probably look at more closely. But because this has been something in the works, planned with a specific set of needs and agreement, which is also important when you try and do these things, and funding to get it implemented properly, then you go ahead and do it. And as I said, this also has an impact on virtually every child in the district.
Why?
So it's having, why? Because everyone in K through 5 will be exposed to these programs utilizing the technology. Everybody in the upper grades, actually, the implementation of the laptops went through this year. Upgrades to each of the classrooms so that we can project and consistently deliver that type in the classroom has been put in place.
But if you weigh the options of what's worth keeping, is it worth keeping the teachers, keeping the paraprofessionals, and all the things that we're looking to shred? Is it more important to keep them first and look at those programs for later on when we can afford them?
Well, I think that you always have to balance one versus the other. And I don't think anybody takes this lightly. I certainly don't. But if I thought that we could go, now certainly I'm not speaking for the board, right? And there are other things that this board will consider before we finalize the budget. I'm telling you from my perspective that this program that has such a wide-arching effect on virtually every child, every student, every teacher in the district.
But it's going to cost a lot of money to start helping the teachers to use it. Who's going to come in and teach the teachers how to use those smart boards and implement those programs and use those things? Because it's not going to happen in that first year where we're already having, money problems as it is. So where's that in-service going to come to help and at what cost?
It has been budgeted. It is part of the budget. We wouldn't go through with the purchase if it wasn't part of the budget.
And is it going to be during the time when the students are in school and then subs are going to be needed to be in the classroom so the teachers are getting that extra in-service at that time?
That's beyond my sort of understanding of the whole process.
But we're approving these decisions.
Well, I can't tell you the details of how it's being implemented in the classrooms, who's teaching when and where.
It just feels like in the last 2 years that the district has bought things for these students without really looking at the resources that we already have and really thinking about how to use those resources in a different way.
The school budget for technology is extremely small. I'm
not even just talking about technology, though.
That's the topic at hand. So if you want to change topics, I'm happy to change topics.
Well, it's that.
Let me finish the talk.
Okay.
So we spend less than 1% on salaries in the district of the total budget associated with technology. Even with these capital requests that are part of the budget, which are funded obviously a bit differently because you don't pay for them all at once, you pay for them essentially over a 5-year period, constitutes maybe 0.6% of a percent in the budget. We have less than 2% in this district on capital expenditures, salaries, on technology. And I think obviously we have great leadership in place now. We have a plan in place now. And as I said, it's a small percentage of the budget that benefits, I think, everybody in the district.
Okay, so then if we take a step backwards and look at why we need those extra things, then you would look back a year to the things that we purchased to get to this place. You said that according to the new math series that you're piloting and the new reading series that was purchased last year for the district, then now as a prerequisite to that, now we're having to buy an additional things to support those services. And I guess my question is then to everybody is, were those things that needed to be purchased right now when our district was already at a loss of money? I'm just wondering why resources aren't being looked at in a different way or things aren't being used, and why we continue to keep buying things for our district and paying all this money to buy these things when we have so much already. And maybe what needs to be looked at is the instruction that's given to the teachers in how to use the materials in a different way to help guide the instruction that's going on in the classroom.
Right. It's hard to argue sort of those types
Well,
of
I just was...
Yeah, obviously the board relies on administration and on staff to make the recommendations as to what they believe is going to have the biggest impact in the district. And I trust that our administration and they're working together with our teaching staff has made the appropriate recommendations from what I can see. And I think that this is a good expenditure. I think it's a good plan. I think it's well paced over a 3-year period, and I would hate to disrupt it.
So when we make these types of decisions, who approves those school-wide large amounts of money that we're spending? I'm not just directing this at you, I'm directing it to everybody.
That's what's being approved as part of the overall budget, obviously. This is part of it.
It just seems very unsettling to know that we would lose teachers or lose things for our children to buy more materials that I don't necessarily know that you need to have right now. It's like I have one pair of sneakers and they're pretty good, but do I go out and buy another pair of sneakers because my sneakers are only just pretty good? Or can I just work with them for right now and deal with it, because I really can't be spending the money because down the road that has consequences? And that's just my question that I've asked several times this year, and I've spoken to different administrators and asking them about it, because it's very confusing as a parent that all this money was spent and now we're at this position where we don't have any money. And now more money is being spent on things, and I'm not really sure if I would say I do feel technology is important, but not at the expense of teachers and certain things that our children have at this point in time. And maybe it needs to be thought about that however much money that is, whether it's a small amount or not, maybe it needs to just wait, because these teachers and these things for our children are far more important than those extra things that we continually keep buying and doing and paying for subs and all these things, and that's money being spent. And I'm not really sure that that's the best use of our money.
I certainly appreciate the sentiment. Certainly is something I know that I look carefully at. I'm sure the rest of the board will consider your comments, and I'm sure they've had similar types of questions in their minds. I think it's up to this committee, the administration, and obviously the teachers who work with them to essentially put the case forward that it's the appropriate spend, and if it is, then we
How
should
much
move
money
forward.
is it exactly that's being spent on that?
On which?
On
the entire, well, typically,
all that technology, updating the computers, getting all that smartphone. What is that number? Because that was not really said.
The ask this year is about $400,000 per year.
The what? I'm sorry.
$400,000 per year over a 4-year span, which once again is less than 0.5% of the total.
And how many classrooms will be receiving the smart boards?
Every K through 5 classroom, I believe.
Wow, it's a lot of money being spent.
It certainly is.
It's a lot of money.
It absolutely is.
I wonder how many teachers we could save if we just waited.
Well, once again, the question is what type, this is the other side of the question, I'm getting redundant, but the other side of the question is what type of benefit you deliver to the district by following through on the plan and making this available.
But how long will that take? Because
I'll
they're not going to go in and they're not going to be able to be used right away and learned. It doesn't happen like that.
Anyone else this evening? I have a motion to adjourn. Conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act, with adequate notice provided as follows. Notice filed with the Courier Post on March 11, 2014. Notice filed with the Burlington County Times on March 11, 2014. We traditionally start our meetings with a moment of silence. Would you join me, please?